And we are live. Thanks for joining us here in the Storycraft Cafe tonight, folks. Ian, Josh, and me, Hank, will be hosting tonight. Amy and Lauren could not make it tonight. Lauren has family in with for Thanksgiving. She's lucky her. She gets to start eating turkey and deviled eggs and
So
all that.
jealous.
She's so jealous. And Amy had some work stuff that came up. So but anyway, we wanted to say a happy Thanksgiving to them. We're going to miss them, but Ian, Josh, and I are going to talk tonight about Antagonist. And a funny thing is, for Josh and me, we have been our own antagonist
True.
this past week.
True.
And Ian is sitting there, the picture of health and perfection, uh, opposed to Josh and I. How's it going, guys?
The old broken down men in the chat, and then the spry young whippersnapper just holding down the fort.
Well, I have to say it, my back's starting to hurt a little bit.
Oh no, here we go. All right.
Yeah, it
Not
it
bad.
happens.
Carrying everybody along. All right. We'll see.
So, Josh, you have been battling shingles.
Yes.
That is, I never had any of the childhood diseases, chicken pox, measles, mumps, any of that. So, shingles is that when chicken pox comes back for another round?
I guess. I mean, I had chickenpox. I don't remember it, right? But I had
Mm.
it. I remember having it and it being horrible, but I don't remember. Like, I'm sure I itched all the time, but whatever. But this, oh my gosh, like 0 out of 10 would not recommend anyone to get this at all if you had the chance. Man, it's crazy. It creeped up. I thought I was getting like first couple of days, it's just like really, tender, right? Like
Yeah.
I couldn't, I felt really achy, like I was getting a flu, right? And I was just, man, I couldn't sit down and I was having problems. And then one night I was getting ready for bed. I took my shirt off. My wife looked at my back. She's like, your back's all red. And I looked to my left side and I didn't see anything. I was like, what are you talking about? It's just my back. What are you talking about? And she's like, no, look at the other side. And there's a huge just line of just icky looking shingles. And let me just tell you, it not fun at all. Like I was telling you before that we went live, if you're frying something in a frying pan with cooking oil and that cooking oil splashes on your skin and you're like, ow, that sucks. But then like multiply it all over your body, like times all the time. Like, and it, not fun.
Oof. I was having a conversation with someone in the Storycraft Cafe this morning, and they were lamenting that life has gotten in the way this month. That I had grand plans at the beginning of this, and it hasn't
Yes.
exactly worked out the way I wanted. And my only response was, that's exactly why we did this, because
Yep.
stuff happens. And it's not some arbitrary number that the challenge is not about hitting an arbitrary number.
100%.
Yeah, it's about being able to maintain forward momentum in the face of life.
Yeah.
And stuff that comes up. It's, can I get through this thing? Maybe not in the 30 days, that we set out to, but am I going in the right direction? And can I power through this thing so that when I'm on the other side of it, still accomplish my goal?
Well, it's the community aspect too, right? Like,
right.
Well, I can't remember if we talked about it last week or not, or I don't even remember I was there last week. But having the community of struggling authors with you, sitting in the chair, knowing that other people are pounding the keys right along with you is very motivating, even if you're only managing to get a couple hundred words between steroids and all your life is the ultimate test. 100% right.
Yeah. Keto nailed that one.
It will throw everything at you, so you cannot do what you want to do.
Yeah. So do we want to check in like we are?
Yeah.
Today's the 21st. Well, there are 30 days in this month. 9 days left. Where are we sitting? How are things looking?
Yeah. like last week I didn't get really anything. I got maybe a few thousand words.
Yeah.
I Okay, total I'm sitting I think around 20,000 draft, and that's after I don't know how many words of outline I wrote. It probably like 20,000 words of outline. So total probably for the project 40,000 words written on the project.
Okay.
And I got some good words today, and then tomorrow I hope to nail down into it. I have absolutely no idea how far I get through, but I'm going to push on to the end, and we'll see. You know, I really hope that we get to do this again for another set of days. And even if I'm not part of the broadcast crew or whatever, I'd like to participate, because I think, setting the goal and then working towards the goal, and that is motivating, especially like I said, with other people. But man, November has just, and then we've got Thanksgiving and then all this other stuff. Like,
I've often wondered, we kind of based this initial challenge around NaNoWriMo because it's
Right.
already, people are writing a novel in 30 days. And
yeah,
and I've often wondered why NaNoWriMo chose November, because
yeah.
because my birthday's in November. How dare you?
Well, yeah.
First
You
off,
should write somebody a letter about
I
that.
should. And then I had stomach flu on my birthday, and that didn't, work. And then Thanksgiving. So, but I guess, you could say that for any month. Well,
For
4th
sure.
of July is this month.
Right.
How are you supposed to write around the 4th of July, or,
Yeah.
or whatever. So, but yes, to tag on to what you just said, we are doing this again. And after the first of the year, I think we're going to do another 60-day challenge, and it's going to be rewrite a novel in 60 days.
Nice.
So we've been thinking through that, and we will repeat this challenge again. And we said from the beginning we were going to pants this challenge, kind of figure out what we were doing, and then try to implement, with more of a plan next time. But
yeah,
announcements about that coming up.
Cool.
Ian, how are things? How are things going? I was sneezing at your cat, by the way.
Yeah. I'm about 10K.
Yeah.
Total. I have no excuse. I just have 10K. That's just where we're at.
Well, you were kicking the pants off us the last meeting I remember we're having.
Yeah, and then yes. That is all I have. I teach 12-year-olds.
And
I come home and I'm saying, no, I went and got in the bed. So that's how this week went.
I think I would rather have shingles than teach 12-year-olds. That's my personal opinion about the situation.
I'm not even a good Christian before. And then some of these kids come in, just my relationship with God. But also my book writing skills. So
now, come on now.
I raised 5 12-year-olds and I kicked them all out of the house.
Yeah. And that's what you do, honestly. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
Right. So I am I'm at
Look at you. You've even got a little look here. Listen, here's the thing, Hank. You can't have Ian and I on talking about all this nonsense, and then you come with this stuff here, and you even got graphs and stuff. Oh, look at Hank Garner. He's got we didn't even get graphics. No, put it up on the screen, Hank. Put it up on the screen. Don't take it away now. You've already done it. There you go.
That's just the NaNoWriMo website, and Dabble connects to NaNoWriMo, and it updates all that automatically. But I am I'm at 47,970. I got 0 words today because it's been a busy work day today. We're working on some pretty exciting stuff at Dabble for some training courses that we'll talk about more later, but that's kind of consumed.
Yeah. He's like,
but yeah, that's I'll get that 2,030 words maybe tomorrow.
Nice.
they're not good words. And very few of them are in order. But
couple of sentences have periods here and there.
right. Yeah. But I think more than anything, I have, even though I planned out my novel, probably 80% plan. My plan has changed because of this. And maybe that's something that we'll talk about more next week as we kind of reflect on kind of where we were and what it did for us. But I've learned some interesting things through this, so that'll be fun to kind of recap.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, but anyway, we wanted to talk. Was it you that suggested last week we talk about Antagonist? Because for everybody comes up with a great protagonist, and we've talked ad nauseum about how to make characters likable and how do you get people to care about your characters and want to go on a journey with them. But until that character sees some sort of obstacle in front of them, and you always hear, make a character and give them something to want, and then keep them from getting that all through the story. Well, a lot of times that something preventing them is somebody, and that becomes your antagonist, either in person or in circumstance. So how do we motivate? What does it mean to motivate an antagonist, to give them a reason for more than just being a mustache twirling, guy that straps women to train tracks? In old cartoons and stuff. What is it that motivates an antagonist? Josh, when you start writing a book, do you start thinking in terms of someone or some circumstance to prevent your protagonist from getting what they want?
Well, specifically on Weaponized, because that's the story that I'm kind of using for this challenge. The protagonists of the first book weren't really acting against the protagonist in a definitive way. Like they weren't, they had captured them, and they were just using them as basically entertainment slaves, right? Like they weren't actively preventing them from whatever accomplishing a mission, but they were there, they were present, and they needed to be dealt with. And in that instance, they were the gatekeepers, prison guards, or whatever, keeping them in, and they wanted to get out. There's a very direct relationship between the characters having freedom and the people preventing them from having freedom. But in that instance, the majority of those characters weren't, other than it preventing them from escaping and doing other, weren't like actively thwarting what they were trying to do. They were just going about their lives, doing what they were doing. In the second book, there's a number of protagonists that are, I like to think of I like protagonists more than antagonists. Like I love the bad guy. I like coming up with interesting villains that, like you said, aren't mustache twirling, but that aren't just like going after the protagonist just cause, like they want their own thing and they want to go and do their own thing. So in the second book, the antagonists are going and doing what they are wanting to do, and in some cases that doesn't even involve the protagonist, because in some cases they don't know that the protagonist is coming after them. The second book is a revenge story. It's getting closure and payback basically for what happened to them in the first book. But in several instances, the antagonist, there's several, are unaware or just aren't thinking about the protagonist coming after them. So they're actively just doing their own thing. And I like to also set up antagonists that aren't evil, if that makes sense. One of the antagonists in the story is directly responsible for what happened in the first book, but A doesn't know that he was responsible for that and wasn't trying to put them in that position, if that makes sense. He was furthering his own instances. He was going on. He was trying to do what he wanted to do. And just through the sheer happenstance of how things happened, negatively affected the protagonist. So he becomes an antagonist because he becomes wrapped up in that revenge and getting payback for what happened to all these things. And so you have kind of a multi-layered approach of active thwarting, which a couple of the bad guys do know that the good guys are around, and so they're actively trying to stop. And a couple of the antagonists are kind of passive almost, where they don't even really care about the protagonist. They're just doing their own thing, and they happen to be just an obstacle and a point where we need this to happen, and the protagonists are going after them to affect that. Sorry, that was a long, rambling, convoluted answer to. I like my stories to be super complicated, and that's just how I am, man. Like I people tell me that really simple stories sell, and I can't write really simple stories. I like, because life isn't simple, right? Life is super complicated. And so when I think
as we've all learned this month,
100%.
Yeah.
My biggest thing when I'm writing, my biggest question I ask myself, I think I've said this before, is I hate easy button. If there's an easy button way, like the Target thing where you hit the easy button, if that approaches me in any way, I will spend days figuring out how to delete that easy button. So that's me. That's where I'm at with antagonists, specifically in this book.
So let me ask you this, Josh, because what I have learned in the book that I'm writing is that my protagonist and antagonist don't have necessarily a one-to-one relationship. And by that, I mean, what I'm telling is a murder mystery, but my main character, Stu Weber, he is not personally in danger. He's helping to solve a mystery that doesn't necessarily affect him. But what he's learning through this, he's learning about himself, and he's learning to kind of unravel some family mysteries and some questions about his roots and kind of where he comes from and some family history. And it's almost like he is his own his own antagonist at some points, or the ghost of his past, or kind of or the ghost of his family lineage, almost become antagonist toward him.
It's a very internalistic antagonist of
exactly
of fighting your self demons or whatever it is.
Exactly. It winds up, even though there is a murder mystery to solve, and it involves conspiracies in this little town and stuff, there are people doing bad stuff. The real story is about what Stu's learning about himself and coming to grips with who he is and what makes him. Is he going to wrestle with the same things that his ancestors wrestled with? Is he going to inherit these same traits? Is he going to be a better man or is he just destined to keep living the same mistakes over and over? It comes down to that old nature versus nurture. Are we who we are because we're born to be that way, or do we become something more than that? And in that way, Stu is his own antagonist, or his his genetics, or his whatever he inherited is his antagonist. So I'm taking a little different approach there. Instead of someone placing stuff in his way that's preventing him from acquiring what he wants, he's kind of wrestling with himself in a lot of ways. So that's another way to look at it, I guess.
Sure. So
Ian, your antagonist in your story, like we know that you're dealing with a fantasy retelling of St. Patrick. Thank you. I still got flu head. of Saint Patrick, and we know, if we know the story where he was taken into slavery and uh, taken away from his home, all of that, then he gets his freedom and then winds up going back to the people that enslaved him. Are you telling that story
Pretty much, yeah.
with
I probably won't even get to the part where he's old, or in my head, like it's a pretty fast-paced adventure, maybe
yeah
like 3 years max from start to finish. So the whole old man coming back to do that, it might be like urban legend, hyperbole, people telling the story over years and years, and it gets changed and what have you. So for villain, I just had this one like overarching dragon over this whole order of dragons, and finding a good motivation has been difficult because one, I've never written like an outright evil character before.
mhm.
So I'm just like, okay. So I'm trying to write what I know. And then I'm like, well, that sounds cheesy. So I'm trying to find this delicate balance of making an intimidating character that we know is evil, but also like if we're going to be spending any amount of time with these characters, I kind of also want him to have like maybe one redeeming quality that I can almost root for. Because if there's any story where you, in my opinion, if you can you can see the villain's point of view and say, okay, I like where you're going with this, but your method is all completely wrong. I can work with that more, and I'm trying to write that kind of character, and I'm struggling. So that's the root of my writer's block.
So that brings up a great question that I'd like to pose to you two guys.
Okay.
And anybody in the chat room, please chime in. Um, do antagonists, do villains uh, need to have a redemption arc? Do people need we love a good redemption story. I don't know how many movies have been made about the underdog that comes back, and and people change their direction, and we love a good redemption story. But does every antagonist get a redemption story?
No, I don't think so. And I think that if every antagonist had a redemption story, I think it would lessen the redemption story,
Mhm.
True.
right? Like that. But honestly, though, I think that we talk about villains, antagonists, or whatever you want to call them. They don't necessarily have to be evil, right? They don't have to. They can just want their own thing that is different from the main character, and I think when it comes to sympathizing with my antagonists, especially like Ian, what you're talking about, where you're trying to get into their head and you're trying to sympathize and empathize and try to figure out like how do I get on his level.
Yeah.
The very simple thing is, what does he want and why does he want it? And if you can process that in your head as a logical equation of this is what he wants and this is why he wants it, and that why makes sense and is logical and reasonable, then everything else doesn't matter because you have the why. And if you can prove the why, everything else is just background noise. And it's because that why, for a lot of people, the why is the most important. Why are you going to work? So I can eat.
Yeah.
Right? It's not what are you doing at work or how are you doing the work or where are you doing the work. It's why are you going to work? To eat. So if you can figure that out, even if it's something little, like like proving himself to his dad, or somebody called him a name when he was on the school ground. But I know it's not the same thing because you're talking about back in the day, but I'm just using it as an example. The why is the most important, and it doesn't have to be. I used to like think days and days and days about like why are they doing this, what happened to them, and it could be something simple as they tripped and broke their finger and were mad because the construction company didn't fix the sidewalks, and now that carries through. I mean, people are crazy about the smallest stuff in real life. And so it's not outlandish to think that some small, like, I want this piece of property, or I want this horse, or whatever it is. And that those whys can be significant to the character, but not significant to the world, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The kid that trips over the buckled sidewalk and then goes around bombing cement trucks, that's a story.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and villains are kind of a crazy thing, because you want them to be, on the one hand, you want to have Voldemort, right? Like,
Right.
And Voldemort is a character that doesn't have any redeeming qualities, and he never will be redeemed ever.
Yeah.
But the one key thing in Voldemort that I felt bigger than anything, and I can't remember if it was in the books. I've read the books twice, and I actually like the movie ending better than the book ending, but we don't have to talk about it. Is in the movie where they say he has pity on Voldemort because Voldemort will never know love.
Mhm.
And that was like the deepest thing, because you look at him and you're like, he didn't understand it.
Like he had no concept.
He had absolutely no understanding of that emotion, and that identified him as a character. And if in your head, if you can, what would that feel like to a person? What would that feel like to have absolutely no understanding of being loved or loved? Like, what would that do to you as a person? And that would put you into Voldemort's head, like, just that simply. But like I said, I like doing really gray, like really complex characters, and antagonists are some of my favorite. My first Terra Nova books had really like mustache twirling villains, and I'm not even ashamed to say that. It was my first science fiction that I read back there on the deal. With Richard Fox, and there were these aliens that just wanted to take over the whole world. They didn't care. They were just big bad aliens, and they wanted to go at it. And that's okay for a lot of stories. Like, you can do that.
Well, that even though we can give antagonist motivations and we can build complex gray characters, like you said, there still is such a thing as evil for evil's sake.
For sure.
Not always, and not everything. You can't just write everything you don't like in the world is not automatically evil. Like, there's plenty of room for gray, but sometimes evil is just evil.
For sure.
And how do you decide when a character is just evil, and when do you decide that a character has maybe a motivation that's just misdirected, or you know what I mean? Like you said, find what does your antagonist want, and then help them try to achieve that, and that becomes an antagonist journey. And then if your protagonist wants the same thing, or the alternate of that, and you set up a head-on collision, that's a story.
Yeah.
But sometimes evil is just evil.
I think that we
Ask
talked about
Tolkien.
100%. And I think that you look at like Sauron, Voldemort, those kind of like,
Yeah.
You talk about redemption, and you have Vader, who is a very veneer of ultimate evil, but he's actually not. And he has
Right.
that, so I think that, yes, in a lot of stories, there are a place for that ultimate evil. But again, if you can give that ultimate evil some kind of link to someone, or to your life, or somebody's life, and it's not just that they, I don't know, came out of the egg sideways and were just pissed off at the world, something that people can identify with, then yeah, I mean, I'm all about that. When you look at so I know who Negan is from The Walking Dead, but I never watched that season. I stopped watching before I got that. But I've seen clips of the dude hitting people with baseball bats. I don't see him as a dude that has like a lot of redeeming qualities. I could be wrong, but like, take that as it just in context of The Walking Dead, that situation. and again, for Walking Dead fans, I haven't seen it, so if I step on toes, I apologize.
Yeah.
But in
I
that
haven't seen it
situation,
either.
then that situation where people are like at the the end of the world and all that stuff, and they turn evil. Yes, to everybody else he's evil, but to him he's trying to do the right thing. So you
Right.
have an ultimate evil with Negan where he's like bashing people in the face with a baseball bat, but in his mind he's doing the right thing. So again, if you can find that why for that villain and that antagonist and make it reasonable, and I think the more reasonable, the more terrifying.
Oh, 100%.
Because kind of like Thanos, that was not a reasonable thing to me, right?
Right.
Like,
But to him it was.
but to him it was, right?
Yeah.
And but again, it was Marvel, it was Avengers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not supposed to be terrifying. It's supposed to be dramatic and blah blah blah. And it was. In-game was great. I loved it. But the idea of half of the universe going away, like just because they had some really bad infrastructure planning on his planet, like I don't know who was running the guidance council for that particular stellar environment, but they did a really horrible job if they got it that far. Like you'd think there'd be some warning signposts along the way.
Yeah, that he should have been pulled out of 5th grade and had a stern talking to that could have solved some of that.
Yeah.
But so Ian, what are you thinking about? Do you have a firm antagonist in mind?
I do.
Yeah.
Like he has a name, he has description, he has set up as the driving bad guy. What's interesting is that he knows that Patrick exists and he does not give a shit at all. Just is completely unbothered by this kid. Like, and why would he? He's a giant primordial being in dragon form, and then there's this 15-year-old kid. He's like, well, why would he care? And that's another part of the issue is like, I need to get Patrick where he is on a level that he would get this creature's attention, because for Patrick, all this is very personal. He watched this dragon burn down his hometown. He seems to be in control of the pirate raiders that kidnapped him. He's like the guy that everyone answers to. So every bad thing that's happened in the story so far is directly his fault. And he just does not care about how Patrick feels about it. So I've got to get him to where he can grab his attention. And then
so you've got to figure out how to make Patrick stand in his way.
Exactly. Yeah.
For something.
And I'm close to it. Like I'm chiseling away at it. I've been dancing around it for like 4 days, just poking at it, and it's right there. It's right there. It evades me.
Because you're making Patrick his antagonist.
Yes, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's probably what the problem is. I'm probably overthinking it or thinking about it completely the wrong way.
Right.
I was hoping tonight would help some of that.
Have you considered introducing unicorns?
I did think about it. Yeah, I did.
But I didn't say we were going to solve anything tonight, but
it's
well, so you're trying to set Patrick up to be a opposition to. I'm sorry. Did you name the dragon? Or are you just calling it dragon? I can't remember.
I named him Weirdris.
Okay.
UIRDRIS.
You're setting Patrick up to be the block or the opposition to that. And what does the dragon want?
Immortality, godhood, essentially.
And
so
how does Patrick stop
that?
Yeah, what does the dragon need to do to achieve immortality?
There's this MacGuffin that they're looking for.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And then I think Patrick's going to accidentally find it. And I don't know if that's going to give him like this cosmic power or whatever. The end goal is for him to be like a super powerful druid. And he can use the environment against the dragons and all that crap. I don't know.
So does it become a chase? Because if he finds this thing and the dragon wants it, then it becomes a chase. It becomes a heist, but at the protagonist is the victim of the heist. If you see what I'm saying, where the
Right.
dragon is coming after him, so he has to evade. It becomes a cat and mouse game.
Pretty much.
And so then you have the only thing I see about that could potentially hurt you in the writing process is then it becomes a protagonist reactive story instead of a protagonist proactive story. And so if you don't give the protagonist the MacGuffin or whatever it is, but you give him the knowledge of where it's at, and then he has to beat the dragon there, or has to, overcome some obstacles to prevent the dragon from getting it, then it becomes a protagonist proactive novel, and then you're not having to always be on the backside of things.
Okay.
Now you could start it out with the chase, and maybe he loses it, and maybe the dragon gets it, and then but needs like another piece, or needs some like a human soul or something to like put everything together. And I don't know the magic system. I'm just kind of like throwing out random ideas. That's how my brain spitfires. But if you have the second act where that is the chase, he finds it, and the second act is the chase, and then the end of the second act, the main character loses. That sets up a tri-fail cycle for the third act, where now the main character is down, he's lost, and now he has to pick himself up and then win again. And so that creates two things. It creates a non-boring second act because you're proactively trying to keep dragon from MacGuffin, and there's peril and all that stuff, and then you make him lose, and then the reader is like, oh, now what?
Yeah.
And now he has to rebuild himself and then go win again. And then how is he going to do that? So you actually have 2 second acts, like they kind of repeat themselves as you're like starting over. And that could give your book breadth and tension, because, we don't know if he's going to win. He just lost. Now what?
But there's still like 400 more pages to go. So how's it going to?
Well, but you can extend that. I mean, you can extend the finding of it. You can do the discovery, the chase. You can have a couple of scenes where maybe he gets away, and then they think they're safe, and then it comes through the ceiling, and smog and all that stuff, and then gets it and loses. And if you're talking about an 80,000 word novel or whatever, a 10,000 word action sequence is an eighth of your book.
Right.
And then you have, you have the climax of your book that's, 15 to 20,000 words. So there's 30,000 words. You're at almost a third of the book already, just talking about these things. And you've got to do introductions, then you've got to do breaks and breathers and all that stuff. So if you break the book up in big chunks, that's what I do. That's why I love outlining, because I can look at the book and go, this is what I need here.
Right.
And I need 10,000 words here. And in my mind, I'm like, I know how to get those 10,000 words. But anyway, I don't mean to like throw all this stuff. I'm just trying to brainstorm to help you process.
Oh yeah, much appreciated.
What's great about the tri-fail cycle that you were talking about there, Josh, is it doesn't matter what form your protagonist and antagonist take on. We could be talking about a hybrid fantasy story like Ian's talking about, or we could be talking about a science fiction story like you're writing, or a small town murder mystery like I'm writing, or Rocky. The mechanics of the story they're still human stories of people trying things, failing, going back, woodshedding, and coming back, and we're telling human stories.
Yeah.
And the human process is the same no matter what the window dressing is that you put them in.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Jen says, and you could put Patrick in a position where he could get the thing the dragon wants right now, but he would have to sacrifice someone or something else, do the wrong thing, sacrifice his own goal, etc. That's I like that, Jen. That's because not only does that add tension to the story itself, but it ups the ante for Patrick and makes him become his own antagonist in a way, which is
fighting against yourself is a really powerful device.
It is,
because you do that every day in life, right? And so people immediately latch on to that. They immediately can identify with what the character is having to decide and go through. And I mean, it because you talk about tension and conflict and all that stuff, and you think gunfight or explosion or whatever, but some of the most important tension and conflict happens in yourself, and then also between characters that have misunderstandings, or they have their own motivations, and you don't know what they're thinking, and all those things roll in and create an overall mask of tension in your book. And I think the internal tension is, if you can hit that right, like if you can nail that, internal conflict is some of the coolest stuff I think that you can fit into a book. Doing the right thing or not doing the right thing, or sacrificing your friend, or trying to get the soul stone and throwing the girl off the deal or whatever, right? Like, I mean, going back to Thanos, that was a really powerful character moment in the movie.
Where he's crying over killing his daughter.
And
he does it anyway.
And he does it anyway. And so, like, again, he's not like this hero redeemed character. He failed and he lost and all that other stuff, but you can see just a hint of emotion there where he's like, I am so committed to this thing because I believe it so wholeheartedly. You got to go. And
we've talked about stories like the Avengers, where Thanos is the big bad. We have talked about Harry Potter, where we know who Voldemort is from almost from the very beginning. Star Wars, we know that Darth Vader is the antagonist, and then we know the Emperor, above him. We eventually learn that. But what about stories where you don't know who the antagonist is? You know that there is an antagonist, but you have no idea who he is. And my wife Dawn and I were talking this afternoon. We were just talking about like great villains and great stories of antagonists. And one of her favorite movies is Man on Fire with Denzel Washington.
Oh, yeah, great movie.
Yeah, and you know that there is an antagonist, but you don't know who he is until it's a mystery. Until it's an action mystery, obviously, and lots of people die, but you don't know who's pulling the strings until the very end.
Right.
That's another great device of an antagonist that's working against you, but you have no idea who he is.
So I have two great examples of that. One is like we were just talking about, the internal conflict where you're your own antagonist, and then another one which is not really a twist, but it's a very interesting reveal. So the first one is I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie Memento with Guy Pearce. If you haven't seen it, or if it's been a while, watch it.
I think I have, but it's been a while.
Memento is a movie about a guy that can't create new memories. And
he leaves clues for himself.
He tattoos himself, right? But the interesting thing about this thing is the entire movie is played in reverse. And while you're the first time you watch it, it's super jarring, and you're like, what is going on here? What is going on? Then you start catching on, and you realize more and more, and then you get to the end and you realize it's the beginning, and you're like, wow, right? But in that movie, he was his own antagonist almost the entire way through. And I don't want to give any of the twist away. The twist is significant at the end, and it's just a phenomenal, like, in that particular movie, the antagonist is also the protagonist at the same time, and phenomenally well crafted and structured story. I actually wrote a short story. The first thing I ever put on Amazon was a really short story called The Watch. It's not available anymore. I took it down, but it was a fun project because basically I took the concept of Memento, writing in reverse, and did a short story that I sequenced in reverse. And so that the premise of the story was that this kid, the story starts with him getting shot, and then it progresses and he's running through an alley, and somebody's trying to get him, and then there's some guy like in a suit, and you're like, why is this kid running? Who's after him? Like all this stuff, and it's just backwards and backwards and backwards until you get to the end of the story, which is actually the beginning, and the kid steals a watch from a department store, and the security guard's chasing him out of the mall. Right. And so it becomes this big, huge, like you think it's this, oh man, what is this? And it's just a dumb kid that made a really stupid decision. But it builds in tension and reveals as you're reading forward, but going backward through the story. And I just did it as an exercise, and maybe I'll put it on my website or something like that. But I thought it was a fun exercise. The second story is
totally
7.
do that, by the way.
Yeah. The second one I had is 7. The movie 7.
Yeah.
And how John Doe, first of all, not putting his name in the credits was freaking phenomenal. Like, I don't know how they got away with that.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
They didn't put him in the credits. He was not in the trailer. He was nowhere. So when people saw him in the theater as John Doe, they were like, what? And that reveal of not only who it was, because you're like, this guy is like some like messed up dude, but then he walks out and you're like, really? It's this guy? And then you find out why and all this other stuff. Like the reveal of that protagonist that they work against for 60% of 70% of the movie, but we never really see. And then we get to see him, and he's one of the most soft-spoken, cordial people you could ever meet. And the juxtaposition of him sitting in that interview room dipping his bag of tea while you're listening to the recordings of all of the stuff that's happening was just a phenomenal like way to present a very evil person. Like, again, going back to the evil, like no redemption. It was just John Doe. And the way that story ends, where the antagonist wins, John Doe wins, he gets what he wants, and also the protagonist wins because they kill him. So the movie ends with both villain and hero getting what they want, kind of. And it's just that movie is like one of my number one favorite structurally written stories, because it's almost perfect. Like there's a couple things like, you could like nitpick here or there or whatever, but as far as story goes, almost perfect in my opinion.
We're going to have another conversation one night about huge twists and reveals, because you've mentioned several stories, Josh, that have these kind of jaw-dropping moments and payoff. And I love stories like that, and I love to when somebody just completely pulls the rug out from under me.
Yeah.
But then, I also do like to go back and reread or rewatch things sometimes, and do those kinds of stories have impact for rereading or rewatching later? And should a story's merit be based over whether you can enjoy it a second time or not? That maybe that's another thing, but we should have that discussion sometime about that.
I agree.
Yeah. Ian, I know that you have been a fan of Batman and the Joker and those types of stories for a good while. What makes and I've often wondered this, and this kind of goes for a number of people in the Batman evil pantheon. What makes the Joker a good antagonist?
Which Joker though? Is it a Joker in general or like a specific Joker? I don't mean to go
just in general, just as an archetype almost. Of just the psychopath with. Does he have redeeming qualities? Does he not? That you can kind of come down on either side. That.
Okay. Kevin Conroy passed last week, so I played Batman Arkham Knight and beat it yesterday. It's been like 7 years since I played it. Joker is pretty close to the forefront of the story. I like that I don't know much of anything about the character. He could be anybody. I don't know who he is. I don't care. And I should care, but like I've been trying to scratch that itch for half my life, and I'm never going to get closure. So, so that's a huge part, just the not knowing, and yet how he is like nothing about him, but he knows everything about you. He is completely unhinged and yet 100% in control of the situation. And at the end of the story, as Joker is being sent away, and if you played the game, you know what I mean. Like he breaks down and he finally admits that he needs Batman because he is nothing without his personal antagonist. So it's the bond that these two characters have built, even though they are at complete and total opposite ends of the moral spectrum, if you want to call it that. There is still almost a mutual respect or admiration, and that's probably the wrong word, but there is a they both acknowledge that they can't exist without the other. And I think that is part of why I like it so much, because it's interesting to have to face with your own self that there are things that you may not like, but they're just, you have to learn to overcome them, even if they want to take the driver's seat, like what happens in the game. Also, I like the suit, a cool suit.
So when you have a character that has that you don't know much about, and you don't know, kind of for all of the reasons that you stated, he almost flies in the face of the reasons that we love Antagonist. It kind of goes against all of those things. So why do people still care about it? Is it just the terror of he knows more about me than I know about him? Is it just that the bump in the night, so to speak, the thing that I can't put my finger on? Is that what scares us? Is it more about being scared of him than it is his motivation?
I think so. I would say so. You never know what you're going to get with him. He could shake your hand or he could shoot you in the head. Like you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to say the wrong thing. If you're just standing there is a part of the problem. And that there's a huge allure for people with that. There's also kind of tying into his motivations. There's this whole debate: is he insane or is he just evil? I'm in team. He's just evil. Like he just. I think he is the physical incarnation of evil. That's just it. And there's evidence to support that or the opposite end. And I think that the debate is a huge part of the allure for fans as well. Because if you can have a character that's been around for 80 years in pop culture and he's still relevant in 2022, they're doing something right. Like you said, though, it does fly in the face of everything, and that might be why he's more popular, because it does go against the norm.
I think one of the things that makes him in general, like the Joker character in general, not like the dropping an acid and getting but I think the one thing that makes him more interesting to me than any other Batman villain, except for the Riddler, maybe, is that anybody could be the Joker.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you were just like, F it, I'm done with this, like I don't care, like he didn't have superpowers, he didn't have like money, he didn't even care about money. And my favorite Joker is Heath Ledger's Joker from the Dark Knight trilogy. Whoop! I absolutely love that Joker presentation. But anybody could be the Joker. Like you just don't give a shit about anything. You just go and do whatever you want. And it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means I don't give a rat's ass about anything, and I'm just going to cause chaos and menace because that's what I experience and that's what I want to impart on anybody else. And it's like, sometimes people are like, you get mad at your job and you're like, I'm done with this job, I'm not doing it anymore, and you're going crazy. But then of course you have to rein yourself back, and you've got personal responsibilities, but you got to eat, right? You don't want to end up in jail. But the allure to just letting it all go and going and doing whatever you want and causing havoc and breaking down the island, that allure is real. And I think that's why so many people identify with the Joker, is because anybody could be the Joker. And it's not like Iceman where you're Arnold and you're like, I'm going to freeze you or whatever, Poison Ivy or Bane, because not everybody's Bane. It's that every guy villain, where you have the every guy hero, but it's the every guy villain that's just happens to be crazy in the head.
One of my favorite,
the one bad day motif in the story, but keep going. Like Batman had a bad day as a kid, so he devoted his entire being to justice. Joker had a bad day, and
100%.
Yeah, he's just like you said, he represents all of us in that what happens when we choose to do the wrong thing on the wrong day.
I actually had a really good idea one time that I may still do. I'm just trying to figure out how to do. Was a serial killer story, and it would have the premise, the main action beat of the story is that the serial killer gets in a car accident and loses all his memory and forgets that he's a serial killer, has no idea that he is one. And the detective that's been hunting them, she is basically talking to him in the same room. They don't know each other. They don't know that they're cop and serial killer. But the setup, the basis, the premise of choice is that they were both abused as kids. I was going to bring that out in a narrative and bring it out that they were both abused, and they were both like went through really traumatic experiences, and the one turned into a serial killer and the one turned into the cop. And then now what do you do with the serial killer that doesn't remember he was a serial killer? Like, that's not him anymore. He's a completely different person. How do we deal with that? Like, so Hank, are you holding up a credit card for me?
I just take my money now. That's a story I need. And
my wife has been telling, I have been working on that story probably longer than any other story that I've ever written. I've been working on that story probably since 2008. And I have yet to, I will not finish writing it until I have it perfect, because I don't want to mess it up. And one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is when I want to do like flashbacks of the kids, right? But I don't want to. I want to show that it's I'm having trouble going, because when I think of like people our age, back in the day, we're listening to like Walkmans and headphones, right? And so like, how do I don't want to give it away that we're not doing a sequence of like one of the victim kids, right? Where I'm doing a sequence with the serial killer. So I'm trying to figure out like how narratively and structurally to do that without messing with the whole overall story. But anyway, my wife has told me for years that I need to write that novel, and everybody would love it. But
yeah, listen to your wife.
Yeah.
She's speaking truth. Oh man. Speaking of the Joker, just to touch back on that for a second, one of my favorite things in that Heath Ledger Joker is that he tells a number of people in that movie a different origin story. Yeah. You know, like the scars. Like it's a different story to every person he's talking to.
Right.
So, you know, he's untrustworthy, right. That just on the face, he's just untrustworthy. And you don't, I mean, a lot of times you'll get a clue, as the viewer or the reader will get a clue as to their true intention, whether they're telling other characters something different, but you kind of know their true intention, and nobody has any clue. You don't know. And yeah, He's just plain terrifying.
And my favorite thing about that whole idea is that I don't even think he understands or he knows what really happened about how he got the scars. He just tells himself, like, he just makes himself up. Maybe he doesn't even remember. Maybe he forgot. Maybe this experience was so traumatic he doesn't know. And so he just makes up all these stories. And any one of those answers could be legitimate. It could be reasonable that this is what happened, because you just don't know.
Yeah. Could be any one of them. Could be none of them. Who knows? Who knows? Man.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. I felt like I went on a lot of tangents tonight, and I'm sorry about that.
We said that we were going into this one. We were pantsing this one tonight because it's just been one of those weeks.
Man, it has.
Yeah. So, Ian, are you feeling any better about where you're?
I am.
Where you're headed?
I've had a few plans in mind for like the fail success cycle already. I'm going to crank that up and make it happen a little sooner, and that'll probably solve the main problem I'm having right now. What I did is I got stuck on that one part, so I just went ahead to like the next chapter or two and just picked up there, and then I'll go back and weave that in.
Yeah.
At a later date. But yeah, this has been great for me.
Excellent.
Good. Well, guys,
I got to talk, so it's always great for me. I like talking.
And you got to spend an hour not thinking about shingles.
I know, it's true. It's true. Thanks. Now I'm thinking about it again.
Well, guys, this has been fun as always, and thank you, folks in the chat, for joining us tonight. Everyone here in the U.S., happy Thanksgiving week. We are going to take some time and enjoy the holiday with our families, and I hope you do as well. And we are super thankful for each and every one of y'all. Josh, Ian, love you guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, dude.